when the stock market was booming. My husband secretly mortgaged our house without telling me, and invested all the money in it. When the market crashed, he ran away with all the money together with his mistress. In order to pay off the debts, I left my twin children to be taken care of by my mother-in-law and worked day and night to repay the debts. On the day I paid off all the debts, Blake, Madhavalmalsai, who had absconded with the money, came back with his mistress and wanted to kick me out of the house. My son's indifferent voice sounded, "You're a jinx. If it weren't for you, my dad would be rich and I would be a rich second generation." My mother-in-law smiled and said, "My son is back. I can finally enjoy a good life." The mistress sprayed me with a high-pressure water gun. A phoenix in distress is worse than a chicken. You're a poor wretch who isn't loved. While dodging, I was hit and killed by a passing car. Only my daughter held me tightly, her eyes red from crying. "Mom, don't leave me." When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the great bull market in 2006. This time around, I want them to taste the feeling of having nothing as well. I was shaken awake. When I opened my eyes, I saw Blake's young face, with a neat short haircut and full of energy. His eyes were red, and he was shaking my shoulders with excitement. "Honey, we're going to get rich. Give me a couple of slaps quickly." I clenched my fists that were resting on my legs tightly, my chest filled with anger. I raised my hand and slapped him on both sides of his face. There were 2 slaps, and the force was so great that my entire palm went numb and swelled up. The resentment pent up in my heart seemed to have found an outlet for release. After calculating against me for so many years, these 2 slaps are just the preliminary interest. Blake didn't expect that I, who had always been gentle and not good at expressing myself, suddenly seemed like a different person. He covered his cheeks in disbelief and stared at me in a daze. "Honey, what's wrong with you?" My mother-in-law heard the noise in the kitchen and rushed in carrying my son on her back. My 5-year-old son was hanging on my mother-in-law's back, and his 2 legs were still kicking non-stop. "Grandma, let's keep playing horseback riding." I suddenly realized that there is no tree that suddenly rots. It is corroded little by little over time until one day, with just a gentle push, the seemingly tall and healthy tree collapses with a crash. In the eyes of my mother-in-law, who values sons over daughters, my son is the one to carry on the family line and the hope of the Blake family. So she indulges him infinitely. She indulged her son in the first half of her life and indulged her grandson in the second half of her life. In my previous life, I was too caught up in the cycle of making money to pay off debts, and had no time to care about the education of my son and daughter. My son became more and more arrogant and domineering, and my sensible daughter bent her back under the daily brainwashing of my mother-in-law. She became a brother-supporting demon. She dropped out of school early and went to work, just to earn money to buy a house for her brother. In those 15 years of my previous life, I lived like a joke, and my daughter suffered a great deal of grievance. When my mother-in-law saw Blake with swollen cheeks, she quickly put my son down and stared at me with angry eyes. "Eva, are you crazy? Why did you hit my son?" My son then picked up a magazine on the table and threw it at me. "Old woman, I'll beat you to death." Luna, holding a bunch of celery in her hand, stumbled in from outside and timidly stood in front of me. "Brother, you can't hit Mom. Mom will be in pain." "How can an old woman feel pain?" Grandma said that her skin is very thick. I squatted down and hugged Luna's small body tightly, with tears in my eyes. "Luna." She puffed out her cheeks and blew gently on my forehead. "Blow it, and Mom won't be in pain anymore." "Mom isn't in pain, and she won't be in pain anymore in the future. My dear daughter. In this life, I will definitely not let her be crushed by the burden of life again." I suppressed the anger in my heart. When I looked up again, my eyes instantly turned red. I said obsequiously to Blake, "Honey, didn't you insist that I hit you a couple of times just now? I was scared by your expression and thought you were possessed. I didn't mean to do it." Blake waved his hand casually. "Forget it. You didn't mean it." My son immediately threw himself into his arms. "Dad, does it hurt? Leo will blow it for you." Blake was very pleased. He picked up his son and gave him a spinning hug. My daughter Luna looked at them with envy in her eyes. I silently hugged her small body tightly and whispered in her ear. Mom will take Luna to the amusement park to ride the little flying elephant next time. My daughter looked at me with shining eyes and kissed me on the cheek. My mother-in-law was very nervous beside us. Okay. Okay. Don't drop Leo. What's making you so happy? Mom. I'll tell you. We're going to get rich soon. He said joyfully, not caring about the pain on his face. Do you know how much the stock market rose today? A full 200 points. The stock I bought rose by 15%. I earned 3.0 yuan in just one day. My son is really promising. We should have an extra dish. My mother-in-law turned to look at me. What are you standing there for? Hurry up and cook. I nodded meekly, turned around, picked up Luna, and hid in the kitchen. I threw the celery in her hand into the trash can and kissed her little face several times. My dear Luna. We're going out to have a big meal. But Grandma asked Luna to pick the vegetables. Luna just needs to listen to Mom from now on. While the three of them inside were still immersed in happiness, I picked up my bag, held Luna in my arms, and went out. I ordered a large children's meal at KFC. Luna happily ate the French fries while I fell into deep thought. Blake likes speculating in stocks and always says that stocks are one of the easiest ways to make money in the world and a sharp weapon for the poor to turn their lives around. After speculating in stocks for several years, it was always just so-so. And he earned less than the interest I got from depositing money in the bank. However, in 2005, the stock market began to welcome a great bull market, and the reform of the split share structure became a catalyst. In 2006, the signs began to show, and overnight, the stocks doubled in value. In 2007, it reached its peak. It rose all the way from 2,700 points and reached the historical highest point of 6,124 points in October. Getting rich overnight was no longer an empty word. Everyone was a stock god. And what was discussed in the streets and alleys was all about stocks. Blake also got his first pot of gold at that time. At first, he was still devoted to this family. The first thing he did after getting rich was to sell the house allocated by our unit. With the money he earned, we exchanged it for a big house by the river. I thought that the hard days were over. But I didn't expect that the saying, men go bad when they have money, would come true. Albeit a bit late. What's more, I didn't expect that even before buying the house, he had already gotten involved with Vivian, an intern in our unit. The two of them traveled around under the pretext of going on business trips. He bought her bags worth tens of thousands of yuan, stayed in luxurious 5-star hotels, and always took business class when traveling. But when he came back, he accused me of not knowing how to manage the household, of spending money recklessly, and of not knowing how to educate the children. All of this was just because his mentality had changed. After he got rich, he thought that I, his wife from difficult times, was not worthy of him. But he forgot that the money he used for stock speculation was saved bit by me. And it was the joint property of our husband and wife. Unfortunately, having fulfilled my ambition, greed is a devil. When the stock market was extremely booming, he quit his job, cashed out his credit cards like crazy, and even borrowed all of my mother's pension money in the name of our 2 children. Using this principal and compound interest, by 2007, he had already become a multimillionaire. When he went out, others would call him Boss Blake. In June, everyone said that this bull market could definitely break through 10,000 points. He secretly mortgaged the house we lived in without telling me. All the money cashed out was invested in the stock market. When the peak appeared in October, in just half a year, the entire stock market was had successively. And all the money Blake invested at a high level was wasted. He was heavily in debt. Under the instigation of Vivian, the two of them secretly sold off their assets, escaped to Hong Kong with the money in their bank cards, and left all the debts to me, his wife from difficult times. In an era when the average housing price in Pudong was less than 10,000 yuan, I owed 2 million yuan overnight. Looking at my 2 young children, I gritted my teeth and left the children with my mother-in-law. I left my public service job, which was leisurely but paid little, And under the scorching sun, I started working as a real estate salesperson. Fortunately, hadn't fulfilled way and sigh. When the stock market wasn't doing well, the real estate market was rising continuously. I went from selling apartments to dealing with luxury houses. In the past 10 years or so, I got up earlier than a rooster and went to bed later than a dog. I spent every penny carefully. Finally, fulfilledly, I paid off all the debts. Just as the days were getting better, my son became even more indifferent to me. He would only call me mom when he wanted money. My daughter became extremely timid, afraid of the light and people. The doctor said she had depression. Just when I was at a loss, Blake, let out a low sigh, who had been missing for many years, came back with Vivian. My mother-in-law greeted them with a beaming smile. You've lost weight outside. Now that all the debts are paid off, you can live at home with peace of mind from now on. I still remember the way she looked like a small person who had achieved something. It's all this Jinx's fault. It took her so many years to pay off such a small amount of money and made my son suffer outside. Vivian took her arm and put a big gold bracelet on her hand. Mom, having fulfilled my obsession. From now on, Leo and you just wait to enjoy a good life. My son stood obediently aside and called her Little Mom, one after another. Dad. Little Mom. You don't know what a hard life I've been living. This old woman is never at home every day. I don't know which wild man she's fooling around with. I'm going to kick her out right now. The betrayal of my husband and the huge loan didn't crush me. But my son's stab in the back completely broke my heart. I wanted to take my daughter and leave the rented house. With our own hands. Our lives wouldn't be too bad. But unexpectedly, Vivian picked up the high-pressure car washing gun of someone else on the ground and sprayed it at me. Everyone. Come and see this shameless woman. She's fooling around outside and cuckolding her husband. In order to avoid the impact of the water gun, I kept retreating. Enough. If you do this again, I'll call the police. Vivian laughed wildly. A phoenix in distress is worse than a chicken. You're a poor wretch who isn't loved. My daughter Luna tried to snatch the water gun from Vivian's hand. But Blake kicked her hard in the chest. She stumbled backward. A car drove over at high speed. I desperately rushed forward, grabbed my daughter's arm, and exchanged positions with her. The next moment, I was hit hard by the car driving at high speed and was thrown out. On my deathbed, I saw my daughter running over and crying desperately. Mom, having fulfilled my obsession. Don't leave me. My daughter. Since she got depression. She hadn't called me mom for a long time. Fortunately, hadn't fulfilledly. It's not too late. Her life shouldn't end like this. Perhaps even God thought that I was really unfortunate and gave me a chance to start over. Now I want to dig out the rotten flesh attached to me. Throw away the shackles of morality. And live a good life for my daughter and myself. Hatred gathered in my eyes. I also want this family to pay the price to pay tribute to myself, who died innocently in my previous life. Luna divided the French fries into 2 halves, and only ate those slightly charred fries that were on the outside. I asked curiously, Luna, why don't you eat these? She blinked her big, round, and dark eyes and replied, Grandma said that we should save the good ones for my little brother. He is the future of our family. And I should always think of him. That way, Mom and Dad will be happy too. I was stunned. And my heart ached. My daughter was only 5 years old. And she had already been indoctrinated with the idea of being a brother's keeper by my mother-in-law. Subtly, she had completely lost herself. Luna. Eat them. Today, everything belongs to Luna. And we won't take them home. Her eyes lit up instantly. Really? Can I have the toys too? I nodded solemnly. Later, Mom will take Luna to Grandma's house to play. Does Luna like Grandma? Luna likes Grandma the most. Grandma will dress Luna in beautiful dresses and tie the prettiest braids. It's a pity that Grandma cut off Luna's braids. The corners of my eyes turned red. My mother-in-law thought Luna's long hair was troublesome and secretly cut it into an uneven boy's haircut while she was sleeping. Luna cried so much that day that my heart broke. My son was clapping his hands and laughing beside her. Little Baldy. Sister is a little Baldy. So ugly. That was the first time I hit Leo hard. That's your sister. As a big brother. You don't take care of your sister, but laugh at her instead. Have you lost all your manners? Leo cried out in pain. Grandma said that I'm the little brother. And my sister should let me have my way. After my mother-in-law came, Luna became the older sister. It seemed that an older sister was born to give in to her younger brother. My mother-in-law, and slapped her thigh and wailed on the ground. I'm old and being disliked by my daughter-in-law. I just thought it was getting hot and was worried that Luna would get lice in her hair. What did I do wrong? Blake was a filial son. My father-in-law liked to get drunk and beat my mother-in-law. My son felt sorry for his mother and suggested that she help take care of the children. This way, she could also escape the beatings from my father-in-law in their hometown. Thinking of my gentle and kind mother-in-law suffering from beatings every day, I felt bad and agreed. Who would have thought that my mother-in-law, who was gentle and honest before marriage, would find all sorts of ways to create trouble after coming to my home? Later, I realized that it wasn't my father-in-law's fault, but that my mother-in-law just deserved to be beaten. But she was very good at acting outside. She would hold my hand and praise me in front of the neighbors in various ways, leaving me with no chance to defend myself. So much so that when Blake ran away with the money, the surrounding neighbors came to persuade me, your mother-in-law rates you so well. You can't just abandon your young children and run away alone. But to hell with that. As long as I have no morals, no one can kidnap me anymore. With tears in my eyes, I touched Luna's hair. No. Grandma likes Luna the most and will only praise Luna for being beautiful. I hailed a car and took Luna to my mother's house. Coming. Who is it? From a distance. My mother's voice came healthy and full of energy. Tears welled up in my eyes. I hadn't seen my mother for many years. Since I took on the debt. My mother felt sorry for me seeing how hard I was working and sold the old public housing she lived in. The money from selling the house helped me pay off part of the debt. She herself moved to Dijon to live with my aunt. Later, when she was ill, she often blamed herself. At the very beginning, she shouldn't have allowed me to be morally kidnapped by Blake's relatives and take on this debt, which led to a lifetime of hard work, scolding from my mother-in-law, estrangement from my son, and suffering from my daughter. She should have advised me to leave that home, take the 2 children with me, and no matter how hard it was, at least the family would be together. Later, the housing prices in Pudong soared, and my mother could never come back to Shanghai. She eventually left me because of her illness and couldn't let go of her incompetent daughter even on her deathbed. This was her regret and my sin. Mom. The door opened. And my mother, wearing an apron and holding a spatula in her hand, was hugged tightly by me. Luna followed suit, hugging my mother's leg and calling sweetly, Grandma. Why did you come back all of a sudden? Where's Blake? Where's Leo? When my mother saw the red corners of my eyes, her expression turned cold. She pulled me into the house and asked Luna to go play with the puppy on the balcony. What's going on? Have you been bullied? My mother had always disliked my mother-in-law, thinking that she was narrow-minded. Since there was no bankrupt gift in Shanghai, she even begrudged buying the 3 gold items, usually gold jewelry, as part of the wedding tradition. She often said, "You'll suffer in such a family in the future." At that time, I was determined to marry Blake and thought that my mother looked down on his status as an outsider. Later, it turned out that the old are indeed crafty. No. I just missed you. My mother looked at me with a scrutinizing gaze. And I rubbed the corner of my clothes nervously. Since you were a child, you've always been the kind of person who keeps quiet. You're reluctant to tell Mom when you're wronged, let alone say that you miss me. If something happens, tell Mom. I gently hugged my mother's waist. Indeed, I'm out on no side. The one who knew me best was my mother. It's so nice. I have my mother again. Mom. Blake will come to you for a loan in the near future. Remember never to lend him any money. You too? I said calmly. He cheated on me. And I'd decided to get a divorce. My mother pursed her lips and went into the house without a word. I followed her nervously, only to see her take out a bank book and stuff it into my hand. Take it. Since you'd decided to get a divorce, hurry up and find a house. Find a lawyer. and fight for the custody of the children. My mother didn't even ask why. I lowered my eyes. The red bankbook in my hand felt as heavy as 1,000 cat ties. There was a full 300,000 yuan in it. This included the compensation money from my father's car accident and the pension she had saved over the years. Mom, having fulfilled my obsession. I don't want the money. I have my own. What do you have? I know you well. You've already spent all your savings on their family. Thinking of the pitiful few thousand yuan in my card, I closed my mouth silently. Suddenly remembering something, I clenched my mother's hand. Come with me to a place. This time around, I will definitely not let myself fall into that situation again. The first thing I need to solve is the financial distress. After marriage, Blake felt sorry for his mother's hardships and gave his salary card to her, saying that he wanted to give her a sense of security. Our daily expenses were paid with my salary. If it weren't for my mother's occasional subsidies, I might not even be able to take out a few hundred yuan, let alone a few thousand. I left Luna in the care of Grandma Zhang, our neighbor. We took a taxi directly to the stock exchange, where there was a large crowd at the entrance. At that time, to register a stock account, one still needed to go through the procedures offline. 300,000 yuan was enough for us to become VIP customers here. When the securities manager saw the cash in our card, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes curved into deep gullies as he smiled. Sister, come here. How much are you planning to invest? By the end of 2006, although the stock market had started to rise, most ordinary people were still in a wait-and-see state. I waved my hand generously, all of it, in my mother's name. My mother held my hand nervously. Are you crazy? Dear? Mom. Trust me. Keep this account with me, and I'll make you a multimillionaire within 2 years. The intense light in my eyes made my mother gradually loosen her hand. She mumbled to herself, "You've gone crazy." After the manager finished all the procedures, I finally let out a sigh of relief. My mother touched the paper, unable to believe it. The first thing I did in the hall was to use the 300,000 yuan to buy shares of Guangzhou Shipyard International. The share price was 1.2 yuan per share, and we bought 250,000 shares. In the coming year, the share price would rise all the way to 77 yuan. The 300,000 yuan would turn into 20 million yuan. And without my mother's principal, I'd like to see how Blake can compound the interest and become the glorious boss Blake. The PHS, a type of mobile phone at that time in my backpack, kept ringing. I answered it. And my mother-in-law ordered on the phone, "Viva. I asked you to cook. Where the hell have you gone? Do you want to starve us to death?" My son also chimed in on the other end, "Old woman. Do you want to starve me?" Blake didn't speak until my mother-in-law finished scolding, "Honey. Come back quickly." Leah was crying from hunger. Without saying anything, I started crying. "Honey. It's so good that you called. My mom fainted, and the hospital asked me to pay the fees. Transfer 10,000 yuan to me. I need it urgently." "What? Adi, you're really asking for too much. Do you think 10,000 yuan is like toilet paper that can be blown in by the wind? Didn't your father get a large sum of compensation for the car accident? Where's the money?" As soon as money was mentioned, Blake immediately fell silent and handed the battlefield to my mother-in-law, while he himself disappeared gracefully. "Mom. My mother used that money for investment. But it turned out that the investment firm was a fraud. She just went to get the money today and found that they had run away." She fainted from anger and frustration. "Blake, your mother has no money left?" "Yes. Honey. Please transfer the money to me quickly. My mother is waiting for me." The other end of the phone hesitated. "Honey. I don't have any money now. Why don't you borrow some from your aunt or uncle first?" I cried even louder. "Didn't you just say that you made a lot of money from the stocks? Take it out first. This is a matter of life and death." "No. My stocks are on the rise. I can earn several thousand more tomorrow. I'll transfer 500 yuan to you first, and you can figure out the rest on your own." I lowered my eyes and a sarcastic smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. How blind was I in my previous life that I couldn't see this man's selfish nature? I could hear my mother-in-law whispering on the other end of the phone. along with the rustling sound of the landline. It was full of malice. Leo, Adashoy, cry quickly. So your father doesn't have to transfer money to the old woman. My son's crying and shouting came through, mixed with his childish voice. The old woman is here to cheat my father's money. I want the pretty aunt, not the old woman. Blake hung up the phone in a hurry. My mother looked at me with a worried expression. Dear. What about Leo? The PHS was loud, and my mother heard the whole conversation clearly. Yes, heading for so my obsession. No biological son would call his own mother an old woman. I even guessed that the pretty aunt my son mentioned was Vivian. The last bit of reluctance I had for my son was completely gone. Mom. Whether Blake cheated or not, I can only get the custody of one of the two children. My mother frowned slightly and wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes with her finger. Mom supports you. You can do whatever you want. I gently rubbed my cheek against her palm. Mom. Come with me to a place tomorrow. In half a year, I'll be free. My mother is much more resolute and decisive than me when it comes to making decisions. With a phone call, she summoned my aunt and asked her to take care of Luna for 2 days. Luna was overjoyed to see her aunt and happily waved goodbye to me. Considering my mother's health, I arranged a full set of medical examinations for her at the hospital. In my previous life, she worried about me day and night. Even after retirement, she took odd jobs, hoping to help me pay off more debts. As a result, she completely wore out her body. Fortunately, having fulfilled Layant Sesher. After the examination, apart from having a bit of arthritis, she is in good health. This has also put my mind at ease. Before leaving, I specifically mentioned to my mother, the staircase apartment is too high. Going up and down the stairs is bad for the knee joints. Several new housing developments have opened recently. You can pay more attention to them when you have time. My mother nodded repeatedly. We really should move. There isn't a suitable school nearby when Luna goes to school. There's no need to rush the matter of changing the house. After all, I only have a few thousand yuan in my hand now. Even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice. After parting with my mother, I returned to the old house at the right time. At this time every day, my mother-in-law would take Leo to the square to dance. When I got home, the shoes at the door were casually thrown around, the dishes in the kitchen were piled up together, and the clothes to be changed and washed were scattered on the sofa. The corner of my eye couldn't help twitching. In the past, I definitely couldn't stand it and would have tittied up without hesitation. But now, it's none of my business. Ever since I let go of my moral scruples, my mastitis has even gotten better. I went into the bedroom and found my certificates and the property ownership certificate. This house was a welfare housing allocation from my unit. It was bought before marriage and cost a total of 80,000 yuan. Since it was welfare housing, Blake couldn't add his name to it. At that time, my mother-in-law was particularly angry and even refused to give the 8,000 yuan that was originally promised for buying the 3 gold items, usually refers to gold jewelry for marriage. In my previous life, I was coaxed by Blake to sell this house and exchange it for a bigger one. The prenuptial property became the joint property of the husband and wife after marriage. And the debts also became the joint responsibility of the husband and wife. In this life, I will think faster and act more resolutely than him. Since I asked Blake for money yesterday, he hasn't contacted me again. I called the receptionist at his company and lied that Blake had left a document at home. The receptionist told me that Blake had taken a team on a business trip for a month. I sneered. In my previous life, it was at this time that he got together with Vivian completely. In this life, he still can't control his lust. Which just gives me some time. Back at the unit, I quietly approached my colleague, Wu Miley. I complimented her on her fashionable outfit today. She lazily glanced at me and said, "Only you, one, at the age of 30. Look like you're 40. Why work so hard?" I don't want to either. My husband has been acting crazy at home these days, asking me to sell the house so he can invest in stocks. He said he's sure to get rich. Is your younger brother thinking of buying a house? Wu Miley was originally drawing her eyebrows. Upon hearing this, she raised her eyebrows and sneered. So, how much are you planning to sell it for? Let's make it clear first. If it's too expensive, we won't buy it. Wumili's younger brother is a well-known gangster in this area. Thanks to his family's connections, he became a small urban management officer and swagger ass around all day. I pursed my lips and said, 700 Dira yuan. And it needs to be paid in one lump sum. But I can only hand over the house a year later. My house is 103 square meters. And the market price is around 800 yuan. As soon as Wumili heard this, she was tempted. She immediately called her younger brother. And they decided to buy it on the same day. After all, in her eyes, I'm just a fool with a lot of money. The reason I chose Wumili is also because her family has a strong background, and her brother, Wu Yingjun, has extremely ruthless means. A month later, the money was transferred to my mother's account, which scared my mother so much that she trembled, thinking she had encountered a fraud. Mom, when you're free recently, go and look at some houses. The higher the privacy, the better. It doesn't matter if it's a bit more expensive. Pay the down payment. And we can pay off the rest soon. My mother cursed me with a smile, saying that my mind still wasn't right. After the house transaction was completed, I submitted my resignation to the unit. My bald old leader looked at me in disbelief. Kiva, have you encountered any difficulties at home recently? He's really a kind-hearted person. In my previous life, when I resigned, he also tried to persuade me again and again. Knowing about the difficulties in my family, he privately gave me 2 yuan later. But later, he also got caught up in the stock market trap and lost everything in 2008. He jumped off a building. We shouldn't let good people feel disheartened. I decided to help him. No. It's just that my family plans to move to a new house. And it's a bit far away. It's troublesome for me to commute back and forth. The old leader smiled and said, I heard that your husband is doing well in stock speculation. We can study it together when we have time. I straightened my expression and said to him, Old leader, there are risks in the stock market. If you make a profit, you should run away quickly. I think it's more practical to buy a house so that the risks can be diversified. That makes sense. He gave me a thumbs up. I can't save everyone. But I hope good people can survive. The resignation procedures went smoothly. I first bought a Nokia mobile phone with high-definition shooting function, got a new mobile number from China Mobile, and called the receptionist at Blake's company to look for Vivian. A coquettish voice came from the phone. Who is this? I'm from the post office. You have an international package that needs to be delivered, but the address on the box is unclear. I need you to tell me your address. Vivian didn't suspect anything. Recently, she has been very close to Blake. And Blake often buys expensive items for her on the official website. Write it down. I live in room 201. Building 16. Zhenhui Yuan New Garden. Okay. Thank you for your cooperation. Looking at the address that I easily obtained, I felt extremely calm. I curled my lips and smiled slowly. Vivian. In this life, I'm going to hit a person when they're down. With my familiarity with the real estate in each district from my previous life, I quickly found a third-floor apartment in the building opposite hers on the internet. The location and view were excellent. I hired 2 private detectives for 10 yuan to monitor her and her home 24 hours a day. After the spring festival, I transferred Luna to a private kindergarten and she lives with my mother. My mother-in-law doesn't care. She only cares about her son and grandson and gives me dirty looks. I don't care either. During this period, I eat and drink as I like. By the way, I also signed up for a boxing class. Since I resigned, I have a lot of time on my hands. And the great bull market in 2007 officially arrived. Everyone's face was filled with smiles. What was discussed most in the streets and alleys was stocks. Even when I went to buy a bottle of soy sauce, the aunt in the supermarket was chatting animatedly about it. I know this is the last carnival, before the avalanche. Looking at the photos sent by the private detectives who were doing their jobs meticulously, I was in a great mood. I took a taxi to the shopping mall, went on a big shopping spree, and even had a delicious steak meal there. When I got home, I hadn't even entered the door yet. My mother-in-law's voice came. What's wrong with you recently? You come back so late every day and buy so many things. Are you cheating on my son? There was a sour and foul smell coming from the kitchen. I couldn't help covering my nose. What's that stinky thing? It's choking me. When my mother-in-law heard my words, her eyes trembled. She gritted her teeth and said, "You shameless woman. Fooling around with men. Just because I put on makeup and bought some things." She said I'm fooling around. Her son has already slept with someone else. But he's still considered innocent in her eyes. I glanced at her and said lazily, "I advise you to shut up. I'm itching to fight recently." My son came out of the room, holding a big sword in his hand and shouting, "The bad woman is back. I'll eliminate you on behalf of the light." I picked up my son with just one hand. After all, he's only 5 years old. Compared with me, he's like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, overestimating his own strength. I grabbed him and gave him 2 hard slaps on the butt. He burst into tears. My mother-in-law was startled by my actions and started her usual act of wailing and crying. "This is outrageous. A vicious mother is hitting her own son. I don't want to live anymore." I was indifferent and watched her performance. She stared at me viciously and raised her hand to hit me in the face. I sneered contemptuously, grabbed her wrist with my backhand, and gave her 2 slaps on the cheek. My mother-in-law's head was whipped to one side, and her eyes were filled with disbelief. "You hit Leo. And now you're hitting me too." I smiled and said, "Yeah. I have no morals. I advise you to stay away from me. Be careful, or I might get itchy hands again." Sitting on the sofa with my arms crossed, I saw my mother-in-law sneak into the room to make a phone call. She probably wanted to call her son back to teach me a lesson. I used to be afraid, but now, I have no more worries. Blake is just a joke to me now. The moment Blake entered the door, my phone received photos from the private detectives. My high-end phone is really good. The photos were taken so clearly. A tall man held a woman's cheeks in his hands and passionately kissed her. They even wanted to have an intimate moment without even having time to draw the curtains. But looking at Blake's gloomy face, it seems that he didn't get what he wanted and is not satisfied. "Ava, Hunting fulfilled my obsession. How dare you hit my mother? You've got a death wish." Ever since he knew that my mother didn't have any money, he completely stopped pretending in front of me. Recently, his stocks have been doing very well. He earns thousands or even tens of thousands of yuan every day. But without the startup capital, his speed of making money is obviously not enough to keep up with Vivian's spending speed. In my previous life, he directly bought the house in Zhenhuiyuan New Garden and gave it to Vivian. In this life, he can only support her by renting a house. I cracked my knuckles. It's still not enough. I want to feed his greed. Until he falls into the abyss and is beyond redemption. It will be time to end this game. I touched the non-existent tears at the corner of my eye. "Honey. Don't be angry. I went to buy you a birthday present. That's why I got home late. How could I have known that as soon as Mom came in, she would say that I'm fooling around with men? I was so angry. Even if she's my mother, she can't slander my love for you." I almost threw up from my own words. But I still had to pretend to love him very much. "A present? Where did you get the money?" Blake opened the box I handed him, and his eyes lit up instantly. Inside was a watch from a certain big brand, with a market price of 50. Arjali too. Why do I know he wants this? Of course. It's because the private detectives took photos for me. Last week, yeek, he took Vivian on a business trip. When they were shopping, he bought her 2 Chanel bags. There happened to be a high-end watch store nearby, and he immediately took a fancy to that watch. But at that time, Vivian coaxed him away with various excuses. Seeing the watch, his tone naturally softened. "Honey, is this very expensive?" "Of course. It costs 50 yuan." My mother-in-law, who was hiding in the room, immediately flew into a rage and rushed out, wanting to hit me in the face. "You jinx. You said you didn't find a wild man. Where did you get the money?" I pulled Blake over. A loud slap landed on his face, and I desperately held back the smile at the corner of my mouth. "Honey, are you okay? Mom was like this just now too." She didn't even listen to my explanation. Fortunately, heading so filledly. I have you to protect me this time. Honey. Blake was stunned by the slap from his mother. His neatly combed hair was all messed up, showing how hard the slap was. Great. Why didn't she hit him a few more times? Mom. What are you doing? We haven't finished talking yet. Why did you start hitting? Son, Madavo Mosai. Mom just feels sorry for you. You work so hard outside. But your wife spends money extravagantly, heading fulfilled my extravagantly. Buying this and that. Honey. I didn't spend your money. I earned all this money myself. Your meager salary is less than 50,000 yuan a year. How could you earn so much? Who knows if you earned it by sleeping around? I saw you getting into a car, chatting and laughing with the young guy the other day. Men are proud of having a stable wife at home while having affairs outside. But they definitely won't allow their wives to cheat. Sure enough. His face changed drastically after hearing this. Ava. You actually cheated on me? His wide-open angry eyes were like those of a toad with protruding eyes. Both ugly and disgusting. I lowered my head, a grieved lie. That's my cousin Ryan. I only earned so much money because I listened to him. He said the stock market would break through 10,000 points and told me to enter the market as soon as possible. When he heard about the stocks, Blake immediately put away his angry expression. Ryan? Didn't he go abroad? Yes, heading fulfilled my sigh. He came back from studying on Wall Street and is now working in a securities company. He has inside information. I only earned nearly 100,000 yuan in a month because he led me. It's just that the principal was too small. Otherwise I could have earned even more. Seeing that he didn't believe me, I immediately called my cousin. Sis. Was my brother-in-law happy when he saw the watch? Ryan. Quickly tell your brother-in-law that you helped me earn this money. Your brother-in-law is suspecting me. Ryan, brother-in-law. Don't blame my sister. My sister is very honest. Last time her aunt was ill, my sister borrowed money everywhere. I just saw that she was having a hard time and wanted to help her. After hanging up the phone, Blake immediately came closer. Honey. Don't be angry. It's all my mom's fault. She's getting old and confused. I hit him hard and then looked up at my mother-in-law and said, Mom, Henning fulfilled my obsession. I know you misunderstood me. I bought you a gold bracelet. The large gold bracelet weighing 100 grams immediately made my mother-in-law beam with joy. Honey. Did cousin say which stocks are good recently? Seeing that he took the bait, I lowered my eyes. Ryan said that there will be new stocks listed soon. Aluminum Corporation of China is a big brand. It will at least increase tenfold when it goes public. We can subscribe to it soon. After hearing this, Blake's eyes spun quickly. After dinner, he hid in my mother-in-law's room. I leaned against the door and listened to their discussion. It turned out that to prevent me from finding out, Blake's stock account was also opened in his mother's name. He used his salary card, and now he was persuading his mother to take out her life savings. My mother-in-law was still hesitant and told him to try first. I smiled. Wolf's appetite is gradually growing larger. Since that day, I started buying luxury brands and all kinds of jewelry every day. I also dressed Blake from head to toe. When I was in a good mood, I would also buy something for my mother-in-law, like a big gold bracelet and a big gold chain. I bought toys and snacks for Leo, and he called me Mom affectionately one after another. I looked just like a nouveau rich. I told Blake that I had mortgaged our house, and all the money I got from it was given to my cousin to subscribe to the stocks of Aluminum Corporation of China. Seeing that I was becoming more and more prosperous, Blake was so anxious that blisters started to form around his mouth. He had been acting mysterious in recent days. The private detective handed me the evidence he had collected. I was overjoyed. In order to quickly get out the liquid funds, Blake actually used his position as a purchasing manager to replace a batch of imported goods in his company with domestic ones. Moreover, to get a large credit limit credit card, he even asked Vivian to make a fake property certificate. The two of them managed to get out nearly 800,000 yuan in total and then eagerly found connections to subscribe to all the stocks of Aluminum Corporation of China. He didn't dare to approach Ryan for fear that I would find out. when the stocks were listed in April. As expected. Within just a few days, the stock price kept rising. Blake had enough principal, and in just 2 months, there were already more than 3 million yuan in his account. If he stopped at this moment, he wouldn't lose money but instead earn a lot. But greed is the devil. It's easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but hard to go from extravagance to frugality. He and Vivian were completely lost in the dream of making a fortune every day. And finally, I rushed to their company with those intimate photos of his infidelity. Everyone in Blake's company knew me. When the receptionist saw me coming in with an angry expression, she was a bit flustered. My boxing lessons over the past 6 months or so had been quite effective. And the skinny receptionist couldn't stop me at all. Where's Blake? Where's Vivian? As I rushed into the office area, I saw Vivian showing off her new bag to her colleagues. Oh, my boyfriend bought it for me. It's not expensive. Only 30 yuan. Envious voices from the people around her rang out. Your boyfriend is so amazing. Is he the boss? He's just so. He only earns more than 100 yuan a day. I didn't want to be a shrew. But sometimes it really feels good to be a crazy shrew. As soon as I entered the door, I grabbed her thick curly hair. Really? No one told her that as a mistress. She shouldn't let her hair down. Otherwise, she would be taught a lesson by the wife at any time. She was suddenly grabbed by the hair. And she cried out in pain. Who is it? Help. But when she saw my face, she fell silent like a quail. Ava, why are you here? Vivian had met me before. I didn't want to say a word of nonsense. I pressed her to the ground and slapped her well-maintained face left and right. I had endured for so long. And finally, I could vent my anger fiercely. After 5 or 6 slaps in a row, her pretty face instantly swelled up. If you're a mistress, having fulfilled my obsession, you should expect this day. I endured not divorcing Blake just to exercise my rights as the wife and release all the unwillingness, anger, and pain from my previous life on them. I'll smash your face today and see how you can't seduce someone else's husband. None of her colleagues around her came forward to help. This must be Blake's wife. I've seen her. I said there was something fishy between Vivian and Blake. I said, where did a young girl like her get the money to buy such a nice bag? She said it was her boyfriend. Turns out it's someone else's husband. She's still a college student. She really brings shame to her school. The gossip was like a sharp blade stabbing into her chest. Vivian cried pitifully, I didn't. Blake and I are truly in love. He said he has no feelings for you. You two even sleep in separate rooms. He loves me now. And he's going to divorce you and marry me soon. Divorce? Does he deserve it? We have 2 children. Who do you think you are? You're just a little toy for men to kill time. There was a hint of pride in her eyes. Who do I think I am? I'm carrying his child in my belly. You'll soon be kicked out by him. That's exactly what I was waiting for. Blake was clearly in the company but was being a coward and hiding. He left Vivian alone to face the scolding of everyone. After a long time, the company's CEO came out with Blake, looking unhappy, and led us into the conference room. As soon as I entered the door, I started crying. My delicate makeup was smeared, and my neat clothes were in a mess. In front of everyone in the company, I told all the grievances I had suffered over the years in detail. Blake, when you were in college, you couldn't afford to eat and only ordered 2 tiles of rice every day. It was me who shared half of my dishes with you. After graduating from college, you said that as an outsider without a local household registration, you had no advantages. It was also me who, with great shame, begged my uncle to find you a job. Before we got married, you said your family was poor. And I didn't ask for a betrothal gift or a wedding. I just hoped that you were motivated. After we got married, you said that your family was urging us to have a child quickly. And that once the child was born, someone would take care of it. But what happened? Just because I ate 1 more drumstick, your mom said I was wasteful. Have you ever seen a wasteful woman who only eats 1 drumstick? Now that you've made some money, you're using our joint property to support your mistress. I even bought you a watch and bought gold for your mom. But this is how you treat me. I exposed all his hypocrisy over the years. I wanted to see how he, who cared so much about face, would deal with this situation. Enough. Adiva. Don't think I'll be grateful to you for these little favors. You just look down on me and think I'm inferior to you in every way. Now I'm different. You have money? I have more money than you. I want to divorce you. I casually picked up the ashtray on the table and accurately threw it at his forehead. He couldn't dodge in time and jumped up, covering his forehead. Finally, heading so felled my upside. He couldn't maintain his image of being gentle and refined and raised his hand to come at me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a smile on Vivian's lips. I smiled. I had been going to the boxing gym and practicing for 3 hours every day for the past 6 months. Now I could even knock down my personal trainer. All for this day. During the existence of the marriage relationship, mutual fighting between husband and wife is called a family dispute. And even the police station won't care. Especially in front of so many witnesses. I was going to have a legitimate, domestic violence fight. In a flash, I bent backward, raised my leg, and kicked Blake in the side of his waist. The pain made him go crazy. He rushed at me regardless, trying to take advantage of his natural male strength. Ava, I'm your husband. How dare you hit me? I threw a left hook punch and then attacked his lower ribs with a right punch. It was a combination of punches, specifically targeting his vulnerable spots. To outsiders, it looked like we were fighting each other, but in fact, it was a one-sided attack. At the right moment, I exposed my fair and tender cheek and took his slap. Then, Mano! I grabbed his wrist and threw him over my shoulder, slamming him onto the glass table in their company. With a loud bang, I chopped at his groin with the edge of my hand. It's better to disable that unruly part of him. After the farce ended, Vivian was so scared by my fierceness that her legs were weak. She hid in the corner, sniveling and crying, Ava. I was wrong. Don't hit me. The company finally called the police. When the police arrived and saw the mess on the ground and Blake rolling on the ground, I had messy hair, a red and swollen right cheek, and lipstick smeared from the corner of my mouth to my earlobe. I looked even worse than Blake. Given the severity of the scene, the police took us to the hospital. I shrugged and nodded and followed. Vivian supported Blake. You're intentionally hurting us. We're going to sue you. After a series of examinations, apart from the pain in his groin, Blake didn't have any injuries. Instead, everyone knew that the adulterer and the mistress had beaten the wife together. After all, such an exciting scene had long been taken by the gossipy people in the company and uploaded to the forum. I felt a bit sorry that there were no short videos at that time. Otherwise, their two faces would definitely be attacked by netizens online. Finally, hunting Blake, the police made a judgment. This is a family dispute between husband and wife. Oral education is the main measure. Vivian was not satisfied. She beat the two of us like this. I demand compensation. The police officer handling the case looked at her with disdain. People like you who violate the public order and good customs should apologize to Ava immediately. With tears in her eyes, Vivian reluctantly apologized. I'm sorry. I lazily replied. No way. At the police station, I summoned my lawyer and bodyguards and formally filed for divorce in front of everyone. Blake held the divorce agreement drafted by the lawyer, his eyes wide with anger. You already knew? Knew what? Your affair or the transfer of property? You played me. Who's playing who here? You transferred marital property, had an improper relationship with a third party, and even referred to each other as husband and wife outside. I glanced at Vivian's belly. And here's some tangible evidence. It's enough to charge you with bigamy. Vivian, afraid that I might go crazy, covered her belly and shrank into the corner. What do you want? Blake gritted his teeth and asked. I gave them a pleasant smile and was delighted to see the frustrated expressions on their faces. I felt extremely satisfied. The joint marital property will be divided 60-40. I get 60. And you get 40. As for the custody of the 2 children, Leo will be in your custody. And Luna will be in mine. The gifts you gave her, I'm entitled to half of their value, which should be converted into cash and given to me together. I took the documents prepared by the lawyer and pushed them over. If you have any objections, I don't mind dragging this out with you. I smiled at Vivian. Poor thing. Your child will be born an illegitimate one. With that label, he'll be a pitiful wretch for the rest of his life. Vivian didn't want to be a mistress in the shadows. Blake, we have money now. Hurry up and divorce her. They indeed had money. Half of the large amounts it cashed out money and embezzled public funds were in Blake's mother's account. And the other half was in Vivian's account. This part wasn't considered joint marital property. And I really couldn't demand a share of it. Fine, Huddingful fell bread sigh. I'll sign. He was fidgety. It seems that the trick I learned, the monkey steals the peach, really worked. I listed out the joint marital property. Apart from the 100 yuan in cash in his account, there was also the money he gave to his mother as salary. And the largest portion was spent on Vivian. As for me, I only had 500 yuan in my bank account. Blake couldn't believe it. Where's your money? I blinked innocently. I used it to buy bags, watches, and gold for you. There are all the invoices. This part isn't considered a gift but joint marital property. Seeing his face turn as purple as a liver, I couldn't help but laugh. I have to thank Vivian for being so good at spending money. When dividing the joint marital property, I could only get around 200 yuan. Now, because of her spending nearly 1,000,000 yuan in total, I ended up getting an extra 600 yuan. She's really a good person. She took in a scumbag and even helped me gain more wealth. Blake reluctantly sold some profitable stocks and transferred the money to me within a month. As soon as the money arrived, I didn't want to waste a single minute. I immediately went to the Civil Affairs Bureau. I brought two bodyguards dressed in black, and he was arm in arm with his mistress. Under the strange atmosphere created by our group, I officially divorced him. Looking at the divorce certificate, I let out a sigh of relief. In this life, I will never sacrifice my whole life just because of moral coercion again. Vivian triumphantly took Blake's arm and provocatively looked at me. You don't know, do you? Blake's stocks have already multiplied several times. If you beg us, we might recommend some to you. I sneered. He's so rich now. What if he doesn't marry you? You'll be in big trouble then. Don't end up losing both the man and the money. That would be even worse. A man who isn't loyal to his marriage is nothing but a disreputable scumbag. Sure enough, Vivian's fingers tight and around Blake's arm. I tilted my chin and gestured. Well, since you brought all the documents today, why don't you get married? I stood in front of them, as if watching a show. Unable to stand my mockery, Vivian actually dragged Blake to get the marriage certificate. She cried and made a scene. Seeing them get the marriage certificate, I clapped in mock celebration. A bitch and a dog deserve each other. I wish you two could be together forever and never be apart. Outside the door, my cousin Rai and drove a red sports car and handed me a bouquet of bright red roses. Sis, congratulations on your new beginning. I left triumphantly under the jealous gazes of Blake and Vivian. Sis, heading fulfilled my sigh. It's such a waste to give those watches and gold to that scumbag family. I curled my lips and smiled boldly. They're all fake. Why should I feel sorry for them? I'm not stupid. I just used them to trick Blake into falling into my trap. There's no reason for me to actually please their family. The bags and watches were high-quality fakes from Guangzhou. Buy one get one free. The gold seemed real, but it was actually genuine gold-plated silver, costing only a few hundred yuan each. With just a few thousand yuan worth of things, they firmly believed that I had made a fortune. How great! Aluminum Corporation of China will teach them a lesson. Sis, decide. I listened to you and sold all the stocks before National Day. We made tens of millions this time. What should we do next? Are you interested in starting a real estate agency business with me? The bull market in 2007 was coming to an end, while the real estate market was taking off and was about to enter a golden period of rapid growth. Trust me, sis. You won't go wrong. No. I did go wrong once before. But this time, I'm grateful for the gift of fate. In the past year or so, in addition to the initial 300 yuan, I gradually sold the stocks of Guangzhou Shipyard International when it reached 70 yuan per share. I made nearly 20 million yuan in one go. Before the spring festival, we sold my mother's old house and got over 1 million yuan. I then gradually invested that money as well. In 2007, you could just buy stocks blindly. It was just a matter of how much they would increase. I didn't know much about stocks, so I bought a few that were showing promising growth. By October, the money in my account was almost close to 50 million yuan. I really became a multi-millionaire overnight. When my mother saw the figures in the bank account, she took me to Mount Put You overnight. I knelt in front of the Buddha, sincerely kowtowed, donated some money for the temple's incense, and also sponsored 10 poor students on relevant relief websites. When you're wealthy, you should be kind-hearted and always strive to do good. My mother had never been so wealthy before. She took my aunt and Luna and traveled all over Shanghai every day. They were choosing and viewing houses, and I let them do as they pleased. Anyway, having fulfilled my obsession. No matter where we buy a house, as long as the whole family lives together, that's what makes a home. When I had some free time, I went back to our old apartment. I was going to hand over this house to Wu Yingjun. I thought the house was empty. When we got divorced, we agreed that Blake would take his people and move out as soon as possible. But when I pushed the door open, I saw my former father-in-law sitting in the dining room, cracking sunflower seeds and drinking white liquor. And my arrogant former mother-in-law, with her hair disheveled, was crouching on the ground picking up garbage. There were bruises all over her face. When she saw so many of us enter the house, she covered her face with her hands and softly called out, "Ava." My former father-in-law, on the other hand, started cursing. "Who are you? Get out of my house." I slapped the contract on the table. "This house has been sold, and today is the day for handing over the property. You should be the ones to get out." My former father-in-law kicked my former mother-in-law in the ankle. "You lied to me." The two of them started fighting right in front of me. From their mutual cursing, I learned that my former father-in-law's hometown had been flooded. So he carried a snakes in bed and came to the city. When he saw my former mother-in-law dancing in the square, he slapped her and dragged her back home. Vivian disliked my former mother-in-law's behavior. Now that she was also dealing with an old man who liked to beat people, scold them, and drink, she urged Blake to kick the two of them out. They had nowhere to live, so they thought of this house of mine. Fortunately, I had already anticipated their behavior. I'll leave the rest to Wu Yingjun. Evil people will always be punished by other evil people. Before I left, Leo carefully poked his head out of the room. "Mom." I raised my eyebrows. It had been a long time since I heard Leo call me Mom. "What's wrong? Didn't you say you didn't want me as your mom? Don't you have a pretty aunt now?" There was a moment of confusion on his face. "Mom, why do you want sister but not me? Grandma said I'm the heir of the family. Why do you choose that useless girl over me? In Mom's heart, you're both my children, and I don't distinguish between you. If I have to say, I like Luna's kindness and beauty more." My former mother-in-law was afraid that I would take the child away, so she pulled Leo over. "Ava, don't you dare take Leo away." I pursed my lips and squatted down. "Leo, do you want to come with me?" As Leo's mother, I have the responsibility to teach him to be good. There were tears in his big eyes, and he nodded slightly. I stood up, wrote down a phone number, and gave it to them. "If you need anything, call me." I turned and left the house, taking a deep breath. Even though the house is about to collapse, the child is innocent. I still can't bear to see my own flesh and blood go down the wrong path in life. A year later, that long-awaited phone call came. The aged voice of my ex-husband Blake came through the phone. "Eva, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. For the sake of our past as a couple, lend me 1 million yuan. No. Even 500. 0 yuan would be okay." I said coldly. "I don't have it." 200. 0 yuan. "I'll sell Leo to you." I agreed. I took 200. 0 yuan in cash and went to find Blake. The man who used to be so glorious was now wearing clothes covered in dust. His once straight back was deeply hunched. His eyes were dim and cloudy, and he was rubbing his hands. Leo was quietly crouching on the ground. There were bruises all over his exposed arms. When he saw me, his big eyes filled with tears. And he stammered, "Mom, I was wrong." I threw the handbag at Blake's feet, picked up Leo, and turned to leave. I'm sorry." Behind me came the man's endless regretful voice, "If possible, for the sake of our 2 children, can we start over?" I didn't look back and said coldly, "This isn't a garbage dump. I don't accept garbage. I learned it from Leo that my father-in-law accidentally killed my mother-in-law after getting drunk. Domestic violence is a marital conflict, but killing someone isn't." My father-in-law was arrested and imprisoned on the spot, and Leo had to live with Blake and the others. Leo was spoiled by his grandmother since he was a child, but after being suppressed by Vivian several times, he began to become sensible and obedient. Because he no longer had a mother who could protect him. People often say that once there's a stepmother, there will be a stepfather. Vivian was at home waiting for the birth of her child. Whenever she was in a bad mood, she would scold and beat Leo, making him serve tea, fetch water, and cut fruits. "You're really a jinx. You caused your grandmother's death. What's the use of having a son? I'll soon give birth to my own child. From now on, you're the older brother. And an older brother should give in to the younger brother." One day, when the water spilled, Vivian reached out to pinch Leo but stepped on the water stain on the floor. Her entire belly hit the ground heavily. Leo stared blankly at Vivian, who was wailing on the ground, and didn't move for a long time until the blood beneath her stained the carpet tread. Then he called the police and said, "Uncle Policeman, the aunt has fallen down." When Blake rushed to the hospital, Vivian's baby's umbilical cord had fallen off and the baby died in her womb. And because too much time had passed, her uterus ruptured and had to be removed reluctantly. She couldn't have children anymore. The police retrieved the surveillance footage at home. Vivian had a tendency to abuse children and was given a warning punishment. And her reputation became even worse. And from that day on, the bull market started to experience limit downfalls. Blake's glorious days didn't last long. The stock price of Aluminum Corporation of China was hit repeatedly, and high credit card debts came flooding in. Vivian had already been fired by the company because of the mistress incident. In order not to bear the family debts, she sold all the valuable things in the house, took the money, and ran to Hong Kong with a small boss in the decoration business. Before leaving, she exposed the fact that Blake had embezzled money from the company. His former company sued him in court. In the end, he liquidated all his stocks and took out the remaining money, which was not even enough to cover 1/10 of the company's losses. He wanted 200,000 yuan because he wanted to run away. But I called the police. In the car, Leo pressed his cheek against my leg and said, "Mom, Leo knows I was wrong. That day, I deliberately didn't call 120. I didn't want a younger brother. But now I'm willing to be Luna's older brother." When the fraternal twins were born, Leo was born first and he was the older brother. Luna was born later and she was the younger sister. It doesn't matter. Mom forgives you. Children are like a blank sheet of paper when they are born. If there's any fault, it lies with us parents who are selfish and greedy. On the day of the court's sentencing, I went to the court with my lawyer to attend the hearing. In the end, Blake was convicted of a crime of embezzling company property and the crime of misappropriating public funds. The 2 crimes were punished jointly, and he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. When he saw me sitting in the audience, a different kind of light flashed in his eyes. Ava, I knew you wouldn't give up on me." My lawyer took out the contract for changing the custody rights. "Sign it. Because of you, the children won't be able to take the civil service examination in the future. I don't want them to have the surname Zhu anymore. It's better for them to have my surname, Zhang." His eyes darkened. His thin lips moved. And his fingers trembled as he signed his name. "I regret it. I was wrong." He slapped himself hard on the trial seat. And the sound echoed throughout the courtroom. And I was thinking about where to take my family to celebrate in the evening. Epilogue: not long after Blake was imprisoned, he was found dead in his cell. It was an acute myocardial infarction. Perhaps in his dreams at midnight, he was still regretting why he didn't sell all his stocks in October. Then he would still be a multimillionaire, with a beautiful wife, a luxurious house, and everything he could want. I arranged for his body to be buried and collected his ashes. At that time, it was popular to scatter the ashes into the sea to enjoy the freedom of not being bound. I generously chose a beautiful beach for him, letting him enjoy the free wind. The next year, when I was traveling in Hong Kong and passed by a certain red light district, I saw Vivian wearing black stockings, holding a cigarette, and pulling and tugging with a man. Boss, we agreed on 200 yuan. Why are you giving me 10 yuan less? Beauty, I don't have small change. I'll come to you next time. Amidst the swirling smoke, I seemed to see in my previous life her smiling coquettish lion saying, a fallen phoenix is worse than a chicken. You're a poor thing who isn't loved. Indeed, if she were to live my life, she would really end up like this. When my son Leo turned 8, I sent him to my younger brother who was in the army. This is the last bit of kindness as a mother. The bond between him and me as mother and son was always thin. I just hope that he will have a kind heart in the future. The house my mother bought was finally ready. I went to receive the house with Luna and my mother, looking at the familiar road. When the car stopped on Hunan Road, the sparse and dense leaves of the plane trees cut the sunlight, breaking it into pieces like a galaxy. At the intersection of history and modernity, this corner alone enjoys tranquility. My mother waved her hand generously and smiled. It was really hard to get this house. Luna took a fancy to it at first sight. It's very expensive. More than 40 yuan per square meter. The house is big enough. I also bought 2 sets for Luna in Pudong. It's not safe to keep cash on hand. It's more reassuring to have a house. My dear mother. Luna is really the leading lady, isn't she? Thanks to my daughter's taste. I'm now living in a scarce villa that will be worth 300 yuan per square meter in the future. Indeed, a blessed person won't enter a family without blessings. I gave her a big kiss on the cheek. My little lucky star. Luna hugged me gently and said, Mom is a phoenix that has risen from the ashes and is Luna's goddess. The sunlight broke through the gloomy sky and shone into the hall of the villa. My mother was as excited as a 3-year-old child. We'll buy a big corner sofa here. The curtains should be green, which is good for the eyes. The master bedroom is for my dear daughter. Luna will live in this room. And we'll turn it into a princess room. Luna's clear voice came, we should also leave a room for my older brother. It's so nice. Although my marriage failed, I still found happiness.